Hello, everyone. Before I start this incredible story, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more shocking true life stories like this one. Your support means the world to me and helps me continue sharing these emotional journeys. Now, let me tell you about the day my entire life changed forever. My husband's phone rang during his funeral. The display lit up on the mahogany casket where I'd placed it as a final goodbye, and the words "my love" flashed on the screen. Every mourner in the church froze. The pastor stopped his sermon mid-sentence. I stood there, my black dress drenched, with sweat despite the cool September air, staring at the phone of my husband who had been dead for exactly 3 days, and it was ringing, with his pet name for his lover. Phones don't usually find their way into coffins, but Jonathan's sleek black iPhone had been placed there by me, his wife of 15 years, just an hour before the service began. I'd slipped it into his cold hand as a final private gesture. The last time I would ever see him before they sealed the casket. It was the phone I'd paid for with my nurse's salary. The phone that held the evidence of his betrayal. The phone I was certain would never ring again. But it did ring. And now, the entire congregation of 200 people, our friends, family, co-workers, and neighbors, all stared in collective horror as "My love" continued to flash on the screen, the ringtone echoing through the church's perfect acoustics. The same pet name that, for years, I thought belonged only to me. 3 weeks earlier, life was normal, or what I thought was normal. I'm Amara, 43 years old, head down, nurse at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in the labor and delivery unit. Born in Nigeria, I'd moved to America when I was 20, full of dreams and ambition. I met Jonathan at a mutual friend's graduation party. He was tall, brilliant, and ambitious, a rising star at an investment firm with a smile that could melt any woman's heart. We married after 2 years of dating, built our home in a quiet suburb, and settled into a rhythm of life that felt secure. Jonathan worked long hours, often coming home well after I'd gone to sleep. I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, bringing new lives into the world while trying to ignore the emptiness of our own home. No children had blessed our marriage despite years of trying. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I believed it was strong. I believed in Jonathan. I trusted him with everything: our finances, our future, my heart. My mother had always warned me, "Never give a man control of everything, Amara. Keep something for yourself." But love had made me deaf to her wisdom. Jonathan managed our money, our investments, our property. My salary went into our joint account, which he monitored and managed. "You're busy saving lives," he would say with that charming smile. "Let me take care of the boring money stuff." And I believed him. I believed his late nights were business meetings. I believed his weekend work emergencies were real. I believed the lipstick on his collar once was from his colleague's farewell hug. I believed the strange perfume was a sample from the mall. I believed the credit card charges at hotels across town were business lunches. I believed every lie because the truth was too painful to consider. My days followed a predictable pattern. Up at 5 a.m., at the hospital by 7. Home by 8 p.m. to an empty house, reheating dinner I'd prepared on my day off. Weekends were spent cleaning, grocery shopping, and waiting for Jonathan to finish his urgent work matters. We hadn't taken a vacation together in 3 years. Our last anniversary dinner was interrupted by a client emergency that pulled him away before dessert arrived. "Next time will be different," he promised, kissing my forehead before leaving me alone at our anniversary table. I paid the bill with my emergency credit card, the only one I had that he didn't monitor. The first crack in my willful blindness appeared on a Tuesday. I'd come home early from my shift, a rare occurrence, with a migraine that made the hospital lights unbearable. I expected an empty house as usual. Instead, I heard Jonathan's voice from his home office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear him speaking softly, intimately. "I miss you too, my love," he said in that special tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years. Soon we'll be together properly. I promise. Just a little while longer. I froze in the hallway, my migraine forgotten, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he would hear it. When he emerged 20 minutes later, I was in bed, pretending to sleep, pretending I hadn't heard the words that shattered my world. "Are you okay, Amara?" he asked, his voice now casual, concerned. The voice of a husband, not a lover. "Just a migraine," I mumbled, keeping my eyes shut. "Poor thing. I'll get you some medicine." He returned with water and pills, stroked my forehead with a tenderness that now felt like cruelty, and said he needed to run back to the office for a meeting. After he left, I sat up in bed, the pills untouched. For the first time in 15 years, I allowed myself to truly see the cracks in our marriage. The late nights, the unexplained expenses, the emotional distance, the way he guarded his phone, never leaving it unattended. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made a plan. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed evidence. I needed to be sure. And most importantly, I needed to protect myself. Because if what I suspected was true, then I had been living with a stranger for years, and I had no idea what he might be capable of. 1 week later, Jonathan died. It happened suddenly, unexpectedly. A heart attack while jogging in the park near our house. A passerby found him collapsed on the running path, called an ambulance. But it was too late. He was pronounced dead at the scene, the same hospital where I worked. The irony wasn't lost on me. I saved lives every day, but I couldn't save my husband's. The police brought me his belongings in a clear plastic bag. His expensive running shoes, his wedding ring, his keys, his wallet, and his phone. The phone? I'd never been allowed to touch, always locked with a passcode I didn't know. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Okafor," the young officer said, his eyes full of pity. I nodded, clutching the bag, feeling nothing but numbness. That night, after the initial shock had worn off and the house had emptied of sympathetic neighbors, I sat alone at our kitchen table with Jonathan's phone. His face appeared on the lock. Screen. A photo of him at his office Christmas party, smiling confidently. The phone that had been glued to him for years was finally in my hands. But it was locked, its secrets still protected. I tried the obvious passwords. His birthday, our anniversary, his mother's birthday. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I remembered something. Years ago, when we first dated, Jonathan had a lucky number, 2507. It was the date we met, July 25th. I entered 2507, and the phone unlocked instantly. My hands trembled as I began to search through his phone. His email came first, thousands of messages, mostly work-related, then his photos, business trips, screenshots of stocks, a few obligatory photos of us at events. Nothing suspicious yet. Finally, I opened his messages, and there she was. Saved in his phone as my love, hundreds of messages dating back 3 years. Her real name appeared in the conversations, Victoria. The messages left nothing to the imagination. They were in love, planning a future together. There were hotel receipts, flight confirmations for trips I knew nothing about, photos I could never unsee. But it got worse. As I kept reading, I discovered references to money, my money. The transfer from Amara's account went through. One message from Jonathan read, "Another $5,000 for our fund." My blood turned to ice. With shaking hands, I opened our banking app on my own phone. I knew the password to view the accounts, but I'd always trusted Jonathan to manage them. The balance in our joint savings account, which should have held over $300,000 from my years of hard work, showed just $18,450. Where was my money? Where was our money? I scrolled through Jonathan's messages with Victoria again, and the truth emerged in fragments. The house in Barbados is almost ready, my love. Just a few more transfers from the clueless nurse. She works so hard to pay for our future paradise. Once the divorce papers are filed, we'll have everything we need. The divorce papers. The papers I had never seen. The future he had planned, without me. In that moment, as I sat in the kitchen of the house I had worked so hard to pay for, surrounded by the material evidence of my husband's betrayal, something broke inside me. The dutiful, trusting wife died along with Jonathan. In her place, a new Amara was born, one who would fight for justice, one who would reclaim what was hers. But first, I had a funeral to plan. A funeral where I would smile sadly, accept condolences, and play the part of the grieving widow. And I would place his phone, the repository of his treachery, in his casket as my final gift to him. Little did I know that the phone would ring during the service, exposing to everyone what I had discovered in private. Little did I know that my love would call to speak to a dead man, unaware that his secrets had already been revealed. Time seemed to stand still in the church as the phone continued to ring. Eyes darted between me and the casket, unsure what was happening. Without thinking, I stepped forward, reached into the casket, and retrieved the still ringing phone. The caller ID, my love, glowed mockingly in my hand. I should take this, I said to the stunned pastor, my voice eerily calm. It might be important. I walked down the aisle, phone in hand, aware of every eye following me. The heavy church doors closed behind me, muffling the collective gasp of the congregation. In the quiet vestibule, I answered the call. Jonathan? A woman's voice, young, uncertain. Jonathan, are you there? Jonathan can't come to the phone right now, I replied, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. He's in a casket. Silence on the other end. Then, who is this? This is Amara, Jonathan's wife. We're at his funeral. Would you like to say a few words about your relationship with my husband? I'm sure the mourners would be fascinated to hear. From my love. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, half expecting it to ring again, but it remained silent. I took a deep breath and returned to the church. As I walked back to my seat, I noticed my best friend Grace's questioning look. She'd been by my side through everything. My immigration struggles, my nursing school stress, my fertility heartbreaks. But even she didn't know what I'd discovered. The service continued somehow. Words were spoken about Jonathan's character, his professional achievements, his charming personality. Each eulogy felt like a knife twist in my heart, not because I missed him, but because everyone was praising a man who didn't exist. The real Jonathan had died for me the night I unlocked his phone. After the burial, people gathered at our home for the reception. I moved through the crowd mechanically, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming. The phone incident had created a buzz of whispered conversations, but most people were too polite to ask directly. Most, but not Grace. Amara, what happened? At the church? She asked when she found me alone in the kitchen, refilling a water pitcher. Whose call was that? I looked at my friend of 20 years and decided to tell her everything. I led her to my bedroom, closed the door, and shared Jonathan's betrayal. The affair, the financial theft, the planned divorce, the house in Barbados. Grace listened in shocked silence, her expression morphing from disbelief to anger. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. Amara, we need to get your money back. All of it. And we need to start immediately. That night, after everyone had left, Grace stayed. We sat at my dining room table with Jonathan's phone, his laptop, which I'd also managed to unlock, and stacks of financial documents I'd found in his office. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Jonathan had been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts to offshore accounts for years. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as his confidence grew. Nearly $280,000 of my hard-earned money had vanished. But that wasn't all. He had taken out a second mortgage on our house, $150,000, without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. He had maxed out credit cards in my name. He had even borrowed against my retirement account. In total, he had stolen over $500,000 from me. "This is criminal," Grace said, her legal background as a paralegal coming to the fore. "This is fraud, identity theft, forgery." "But he's dead," I replied numbly. "What can I do?" "The money didn't die with him, Amara. And neither did his accomplice. This Victoria person. She's out there somewhere, possibly with your money. We need professional help." The next morning, with Grace by my side, I contacted a forensic accountant and a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. I showed them everything: the messages, the transfers, the forged documents. They asked hard questions. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? Why had I given him complete control? How could I have been so blind? Each question felt like an accusation, highlighting my naivety, my failure to protect myself. But Grace squeezed my hand under the table, a silent reminder that I was the victim here, not the culprit. The investigation began immediately. The forensic accountant, Mr. Chen, tracked the money trail while the lawyer, Ms. Patel, built a legal case. I provided them with everything I had: passwords, account numbers, statements. I also gave them Victoria's phone number from Jonathan's contacts. As they worked, I returned to my job at the hospital. I needed the routine, the distraction of caring for others when my own life was in shambles. My colleagues treated me with kid gloves, offering sympathetic smiles and gentle pats on the shoulder. None of them knew the truth. I wasn't grieving a loving husband. I was hunting down a thief who happened to be dead. A week after the funeral, Mr. Chen called with his first findings. "Mrs. Okafor, we've traced some of the transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands," he said. "The account belongs to a company called Sunrise Ventures, registered to a V. Lawson. Does that name mean anything to you?" Victoria Lawson. Finally, I had her full name. "She was my husband's mistress," I replied flatly. "Well, she's more than that," Mr. Chen continued. "She appears to be a financial advisor at Meridian Investments, the same firm where your husband worked." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Jonathan betrayed me with another woman, but he'd done so with a colleague. How many of their coworkers knew? Had I been the subject of office gossip for years? The humiliation burned as hot as my anger. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I searched for Victoria Lawson online. Her LinkedIn profile appeared first. 32 years old, MBA from Wharton, 5 years at Meridian Investments. Her profile picture showed a beautiful woman with copper-colored hair and confident green eyes. She looked polished, professional, successful, everything I'd been too busy working night shifts to become. Her Instagram was public. Another shock. Photos of exotic vacations, designer clothes, expensive restaurants. And there, buried among the carefully curated images of her perfect life, was my husband, Jonathan, smiling at her across a candlelit dinner in Paris. Jonathan on a yacht, his arm around her waist. Jonathan kissing her cheek in front of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. All posted during times he had told me he was on business trips, or working late. The most recent photo had been posted just 3 weeks ago. Them together at a beachfront property, the caption reading, "Site visit to our future paradise. Barbados, your dream home. My money, my retirement, my security, all stolen." To build their dream home in Barbados. I forwarded the photos to Mr. Chen and Ms. Patel, my hands shaking with rage. Then I called Grace. "I found her," I said when she answered. "And she's been flaunting my money on Instagram for years." Grace came over immediately. As we scrolled through Victoria's social media history together, more connections emerged. Jonathan had introduced her to his friends who had sat in my home, eaten my food, and apparently known about his double life the entire time. There were photos of them at parties with people I recognized, people who had attended his funeral and hugged me with false sympathy. "Amara, I think it's time we paid Ms. Lawson a visit," Grace said, a dangerous edge in her voice. I shook my head. "No, we do this legally. I won't sink to their level." The next day, Ms. Patel filed emergency motions to freeze Victoria's assets and the Cayman Islands account. She also contacted Meridian Investments with evidence of potential financial misconduct by both Jonathan and Victoria, suggesting their involvement in fraud and embezzlement. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from an unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice greeted me. "Mrs. Okafor? This is Richard Keller, CEO of Meridian Investments. I've just been made aware of some concerning allegations regarding your late husband and one of our current employees. I was wondering if we might meet to discuss the situation." His tone was careful, measured, the voice of a man trying to contain a potential scandal. I agreed to meet him at his office the following morning. When I arrived at Meridian's gleaming downtown office, I was immediately ushered into a conference room. Richard Keller was there, along with a woman I recognized as the company's legal counsel from the firm's website. To my surprise, Mr. Chen and Ms. Patel had also been invited and were already seated at the table. "Mrs. Okafor, thank you for coming," Keller began, once we were all settled. "I want to assure you that Meridian had no knowledge of Jonathan's actions. We are as shocked as you are by what's been uncovered. I doubted that very much, but I kept my face neutral." "Where is Victoria Lawson?" I asked instead. Keller and the lawyer exchanged glances. "Ms. Lawson has been suspended pending our internal investigation," the lawyer said. "She is cooperating fully." "Cooperating?" I repeated. "Is that what you call hiding my stolen money in offshore accounts?" "Mrs. Okafor," Keller interjected, "we've come to understand that there may have been some irregularities in how your joint finances with Jonathan were handled. Meridian wants to make this right. We value our reputation, and we do not condone any form of financial misconduct by our employees." Ms. Patel leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Keller?" "Full restitution," he replied without hesitation. "If your forensic accounting confirms that funds were misappropriated, Meridian will cover the entire amount. In return, we ask for discretion regarding this matter." I understood immediately what was happening. This wasn't about doing the right thing. This was about avoiding a scandal. Jonathan and Victoria had likely violated securities laws and financial regulations. If this became public, Meridian could face not just reputational damage, but regulatory scrutiny as well. "I want my money back," I said firmly. "All of it. And I want to know exactly how this happened under your watch, Mr. Keller." The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, we had a preliminary agreement. Meridian would repay the full $500,000, plus interest, regardless of whether all of it could be recovered from Victoria or Jonathan's estate. In exchange, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement about the circumstances. Mr. Chen would have full access to conduct his forensic investigation with the company's cooperation. As I left Meridian's offices with Ms. Patel and Mr. Chen, a strange sense of emptiness washed over me. The money would be returned. A victory, certainly. But the betrayal remained. Nothing could restore the years of trust I had given Jonathan. The love I had wasted on a man who had been planning to leave, me financially ruined. "This is a good outcome, Amara," Ms. Patel said, mistaking my silence for disappointment. "Many victims of financial fraud never recover their losses." "I know," I replied. "I just need to see Victoria. I need to look her in the eyes." Ms. Patel shook her head. "That's not advisable. The agreement with Meridian doesn't prohibit me from speaking to her, I cut in. It just prohibits me from speaking publicly about the fraud. I'm not planning to make a scene, Miss Patel. I just need closure. She looked unconvinced but didn't argue further. As we parted ways, I checked my phone and found a text from Grace. News on Victoria. Call me. I called immediately. What did you find? She's at the Westbrook Hotel, Grace said. My cousin works security there. Victoria checked in yesterday, under her own name. Not exactly trying to hide. Want me to pick you up? 20 minutes later, Grace's car pulled up outside Meridian's building. I got in, still dressed in the formal attire I'd chosen for the meeting. A black suit that felt appropriate for confronting both a corporation and my husband's mistress on the same day. Are you sure about this? Grace asked as we drove to the hotel. Your lawyer advised against it. I'm sure, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've spent 15 years not knowing the truth about my own life. I need to hear from her what was real and what wasn't. The Westbrook was one of the city's most exclusive hotels, another reminder of how my money had funded their luxury lifestyle. The lobby was marble and glass, with staff who moved with practiced efficiency. Grace's cousin met us by the elevators, dressed in his security uniform. Room 1245, he told us quietly. She's been in all day. Ordered room service about an hour ago. Thank you, Marcus, Grace said. We won't cause any trouble. He nodded and walked away, having done his favor for his cousin. Grace and I rode the elevator in silence. As we approached room 1245, my heart raced and my palms grew sweaty. What would I say to her? What could possibly encompass the magnitude of what she and Jonathan had done? Grace squeezed my hand. I'll wait right here if you want privacy. I nodded gratefully and knocked on the door. There was a long pause, then the sound of movement inside. The door opened a crack, secured by a chain, and a sliver of Victoria Lawson's face appeared. The same face from the Instagram photos, but now pale and tense. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed immediately by fear. What do you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to talk, I said simply. Just talk. She hesitated, then closed the door. I heard the IE chain sliding, and then the door reopened fully. Victoria stood there in expensive loungewear, her copper hair pulled back in a messy bun. Up close, she looked younger than her 32 years, and visibly shaken. You should know my lawyer advised against this meeting, she said, stepping back to, Let me enter. Mine too, I replied, walking into the suite. The room was luxurious, a corner suite with panoramic city views. A room service tray sat on the dining table, the meal barely touched. I noticed a half-packed suitcase on the bed. Going somewhere? I asked, nodding toward the suitcase. Victoria crossed her arms defensively. I've been suspended, and my assets are frozen. I doubt I'll have a job to return to. That's what happens when you steal $500,000, I said, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. She flinched but didn't deny it. Instead, she motioned to the sitting area. Should we sit? We sat on opposite ends of a plush sofa, the space between us charged with unspoken accusations. I studied her face. This woman who had shared my husband's bed, who had spent my money, who had laughed with him about the clueless nurse who financed their future. Why did you call? Him? I asked finally. At the funeral. You knew he was dead. The firm sent out an announcement. Victoria looked down at her hands. I didn't believe it, she said quietly. Jonathan always had contingency plans. Always. When the announcement came, I thought it might be a cover, that he'd faked his death to avoid something. It wouldn't have been the craziest thing he'd done. Her words hit me like a revelation. Of course, Jonathan the manipulator, Jonathan the liar, would be capable of faking his own death in his mistress's mind. but not in mine. I had identified his body at the morgue. I had felt his cold skin. I knew he was truly gone. He's dead, Victoria. Really dead. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know that now. But Jonathan had promised we would be together once everything was finalized. The house in Barbados, the new identities, the fresh start. It was all planned. When he died, I thought maybe he'd just accelerated the plan without telling me. New identities? I repeated, feeling sick. Victoria looked up, surprise on her face. You don't know, do you? The money from your accounts, that was just part of it. Jonathan had been embezzling from clients at Meridian for years. The total is well over $2 million. That's why we needed to disappear completely. New names, new passports, new lives. The shock of Victoria's revelation left me momentarily speechless. $2 million. Client funds. This wasn't just about our marriage or my money anymore. This was major financial fraud that could affect countless innocent people. And Meridian was trying to quietly sweep it under the rug with their settlement offer. Does Meridian know about the client funds? I asked, my voice barely audible. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. They're conducting an internal audit now. That's why they suspended me. Jonathan was careful, but once they started looking closely at his accounts, well, it's all unraveling. And they offered to repay my losses to keep me quiet, I said, understanding dawning. To prevent me from triggering a wider investigation that would reveal the client fraud. Probably, she agreed. The firm can survive reimbursing you. They can't survive a major embezzlement scandal, not in this market. I stood up abruptly, my mind racing. I need to go. Victoria rose too, a pleading look in her eyes. Amara, wait. I'm sorry. For everything. I know that means nothing, but I am. Jonathan told me you two were already separated, that you'd agreed to divorce. By the time I learned the truth, I was in too deep. I turned to her, feeling a strange mix of pity and disgust. You read the messages, Victoria. You saw him calling me the clueless nurse. You knew exactly who was paying for your vacations and your beachfront property. She didn't deny it. Instead, she asked quietly, what happens now? Will you go to the authorities? I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But whatever I decide, it won't be to protect you or Meridian. It will be because it's the right thing to do for the people who trusted Jonathan with their money. I left the hotel room without looking back. Grace was waiting in the hallway, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? What happened? It's worse than we thought, I said, walking briskly toward the elevators. Much worse. I need to call Ms. Patel immediately. In the car, I explained everything Victoria had told me. Grace listened in stunned silence, then said, You can't sign that non-disclosure agreement now. Not when there are other victims. I know, I replied, already dialing Ms. Patel's number. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. Ms. Patel arranged an emergency meeting with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Mr. Chen compiled all of our evidence, plus the new information, about potential client fraud. By the following afternoon, SEC investigators had descended on Meridian Investments, and news vans were parked outside their headquarters. Richard Keller called me personally, his earlier professional courtesy replaced by barely contained fury. Mrs. Okafor, I thought we had an understanding. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Our understanding was based on incomplete information, Mr. Keller. I replied calmly. You knew Jonathan had stolen from clients, not just from me. You tried to buy my silence to cover up a much larger crime. You'll regret this, he said before hanging up. His threat didn't frighten me. After everything I'd been through, a corporate bully seemed almost laughably insignificant. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Jonathan and Victoria's fraud was revealed. They had embezzled approximately $2.4 million from client accounts, primarily targeting elderly investors who were less likely to notice small, steady depletions. Meridian was facing not only SEC penalties, but multiple civil lawsuits. Victoria cooperated fully with the authorities, hoping for leniency. She provided all the details of the scheme, including the offshore accounts, the property in Barbados, and the planned disappearance. In exchange for her testimony, she negotiated a plea deal that would likely result in a reduced prison sentence. As for me, I became an unexpected hero to the defrauded clients. The widow who had exposed the fraud despite her own personal tragedy. Local news outlets wanted interviews. National financial programs invited me as a guest to discuss financial abuse in marriages. I declined most requests, preferring to process my experiences privately. 3 months after Jonathan's funeral, all of my stolen money had been recovered and returned. The house in Barbados was seized and sold, with the proceeds distributed to the victims of the fraud. Meridian established a restitution fund to compensate all affected clients, and Richard Keller resigned in disgrace. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But justice didn't heal the wound of betrayal or restore my faith in love. It didn't answer the question that kept me awake at night. Had Jonathan ever truly loved me? Or had I been nothing more than a convenience, a nurse with a good income, who worked night shifts and asked too few questions? 6 months after Jonathan's funeral, I sold our house. I couldn't bear to live there anymore, surrounded by memories of a marriage that had been built on lies. With my recovered money plus the proceeds from the house sale, I had enough to start completely fresh. Grace helped me find a beautiful condo overlooking the river, smaller than our suburban house but filled with light and entirely mine. I redecorated every inch of it, choosing colors and furniture that reflected my taste alone. For the first time in my adult life, I created a space that was wholly Amara, with no compromises. I also made changes at work, reducing my night shifts, and accepting a leadership position that I'd previously declined because Jonathan had claimed it would disrupt our routine. I opened new bank accounts at different institutions and worked with a financial advisor, a woman recommended by Ms. Patel, to create a secure plan for my future. On the 1-year anniversary of Jonathan's death, I received an unexpected letter with a prison return address. Victoria had written to me, a long handwritten confession of her role in the fraud and her relationship with Jonathan. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but offered something I hadn't expected: honesty about who Jonathan really was. He was a man who could make anyone feel like the center of the universe when it served his purpose, she wrote. But the real love of his life was always money and what it could buy him. Neither of us truly knew him because the real Jonathan was hidden behind whatever mask he thought we wanted to see. Her words brought a strange comfort. The man I had grieved wasn't real. Therefore, my grief wasn't for a lost love, but for a lost illusion. I could finally stop questioning what I had done wrong or what I could have done differently. Jonathan's betrayal wasn't my failure. It was his. That evening, I met Grace for dinner at our favorite restaurant. As we shared a bottle of wine, she asked about my plans for the future. "I'm thinking of going back to school," I said, surprising myself with the declaration. "Maybe get a master's in nursing education. I've been enjoying mentoring the new nurses, and I think I could make a difference there." Grace smiled warmly. "That's perfect for you, Amara. You've always been a natural teacher." "And I'm thinking about that trip to Nigeria I've been putting off for years. It's time I showed my nieces and nephews their aunt isn't just a voice on the phone." "I love this version of you," Grace said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Making plans for yourself, thinking about what you want." I smiled, realizing she was right. For 15 years, my plans had revolved around Jonathan's needs and schedule. Now, my time was truly my own. My money was my own. My life was my own. "There's something else," I admitted, feeling a flutter of nervousness. "I've been talking with a grief counselor, but not about Jonathan. About the children we never had." I'm thinking of looking into adoption, as a single parent. Grace's eyes widened. Amara, that's huge. It's early days, I cautioned. I'm just exploring options right now. But for the first time, I'm considering motherhood on my own terms, not waiting for someone else's timeline or approval. To Amara 2.0, Grace said, raising her glass. Stronger, wiser, and finally free. We clinked glasses, and as I sipped my wine, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since the day Jonathan's phone rang at his funeral. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to choose. And for now, that was enough. The following week, I received another unexpected communication. An email from one of Jonathan's former clients, an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Bennett. She had been one of the victims of his fraud, losing nearly $200,000 of her retirement savings before the scheme was uncovered. Dear Mrs. Okafor, her email began. I want to thank you personally for your courage in exposing what your husband and his accomplice had done. Thanks to you, I've recovered my savings and can continue to live independently in my own home. Would you consider meeting me for tea? I feel we might have much to talk about. I agreed, and we met at a quiet cafe near the hospital. Mrs. Bennett was in her late 70s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She'd been a college professor before retirement and had a way of asking questions that made me want to share my story. As we talked, I realized we were both survivors of Jonathan's manipulation, different types of victims who had emerged stronger. When I mentioned my interest in adoption, her face lit up. I sit on the board of a children's foundation, she told me. We work with several adoption agencies. If you're serious about this path, I'd be happy to make some introductions. That chance meeting blossomed into an unexpected friendship. Mrs. Bennett became a mentor and ally in my adoption journey, offering wisdom and practical support. Through her connections, I began volunteering at a group home for children awaiting permanent placement, spending my days off reading stories and helping with homework. It was there that I met Zuri, a serious 8-year-old girl with bright eyes and a quiet determination that reminded me of myself as a child. Born in Kenya but brought to America as a toddler, she had entered the foster system after losing her parents in a car accident. She had been in 3 different homes in 5 years, labeled as too reserved by potential adoptive parents looking for an outgoing child. But I saw beyond her reserved exterior to the thoughtful, resilient girl beneath. We bonded over books and puzzles, and soon she was asking when I would visit next. 6 months later, I began the formal process to adopt her. Today, exactly 2 years after Jonathan's funeral, Zuri and I live in our riverside condo. I've completed my master's degree, and now divide my time between clinical work and teaching nursing students. Zuri is thriving in school, particularly in science and mathematics. We visited Nigeria together, where she formed an immediate bond with my extended family. We're planning a trip to Kenya next year to connect with her heritage as well. Grace remains my closest friend and is now Zuri's godmother. Mrs. Bennett has become something of a grandmother figure to both of us, frequently joining us for Sunday dinners and helping Zuri with her more challenging homework. As for Victoria, she was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for her role in the fraud. She continues to write occasionally, her letters a strange blend of atonement and updates on her life behind bars. I don't hate her anymore. My energy is too precious to waste on hatred. But I don't forgive her either. Some betrayals leave permanent marks. Jonathan's grave remains unvisited. The man buried there is a stranger to me now, someone I never truly knew. The pain of his betrayal has faded with time, replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of the relationship we actually had versus the one I thought we shared. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still marvel at how a single moment, a ringing phone at a funeral, could change the course of a life so completely. That unexpected call exposed a betrayal, but it also set me free from a marriage built on lies. It led me to my daughter, to new friendships, to a life authentic to my own desires, rather than molded around someone else's. My husband's phone rang during his funeral, and in answering that call, I found my true self. Thank you all so much for reading my story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to my channel for more powerful, emotional, true stories. Your support means everything to me and helps me continue sharing these life-changing journeys. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Also, let me know where you're reading from. I'm always curious about my worldwide audience. Until next time, remember that sometimes what feels like an ending is really just the beginning of a more authentic chapter in your story. With heartfelt thanks for your support, Amara.